Hello everyone and welcome to the JW Review. This week we're looking at study article number 14, and this is the last article of the March 2023 Watchtower Study Edition, and this is titled, "By This All Will Know That You Are My Disciples." And the key text here is John 13:35, so let's check that out. "By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." So a couple of observations are underway, just so we can kind of get some ideas flowing in our minds as we review this article. So let me give you the Watchtower translation of the title of this article. That is, "We are better than everyone else. Look at how great we are." Now, if you think that is just taking it a little bit too far, stay tuned and we will find out if I'm taking this too far or if this is basically what the Jehovah's Witnesses want to claim for themselves. And we should just kind of keep it in our minds too and ask the question, is this pride or is this being humble? And which is better? Which is better? What does the Bible have to say about pride? Do your own Bible research and then come back and share that with us. Okay, so 2 observations, which also includes some questions. So the first thing is, nowhere did the apostles, the early followers of Jesus Christ, nowhere did they proclaim the true religion on the basis of their love for one another, as if the true religion is even an organization in the first place. So that's number one observation, because that's a big part of what this article is about. It's about how do we know what the true religion is? How do we know? And then second, this is more of a question, if true religion as an organization is determined by evaluating their love, then how exactly do we determine this or evaluate that? Give us the ideas, give us the tools. How do we do this? Does this just mean we show up at some kingdom halls with pen and paper in our hands as an outside observer? We sit in the back, we look around, and we write down what we see and say, okay, this person looks like they're loving someone else. Oh, these people are being kind and friendly to me. Oh, this person was pretty rude to me. How exactly do we do this? How exactly do we do this? And do the scriptures give us the guidelines for doing this? Because remember, this is going to be the organization's claim that you can determine that we are the true religion by the way that they show love among themselves. Okay, how, as an outside observer, how do we determine this? All right, so let's get into the article. Imagine a married couple attending their first meeting at a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. They are deeply impressed by the warm welcome they receive and the love among those in the congregation. Okay, so they make some observations. They get warmly welcomed, and that's probably true. I've been to Kingdom Halls where I've been warmly welcomed, right? And they have love amongst those in the congregation. On the way home from the meeting, the wife says to her husband, "There is something different about Jehovah's Witnesses. in a good way, right? So it's not that there's something different in a bad way, there's something different in a good way. Now, this is really interesting to me because what I would want to know is how many churches did they go to? How many churches did they try out, right? And what did they see that was actually different? Did they not get warmly welcomed at the churches? Did they not see any love amongst others in that church? If we're really evaluating it, just let me give you an example. Is it okay for me to evaluate this by, let's just say I'm going to go to 10 different churches in my immediate vicinity, and then I'm going to go to the Kingdom Hall, right? Is it okay for me, with a pen and paper notebook, write down my evaluation, and then conclude, wow, you know what? The Presbyterian church over here, they were actually a lot more friendly to me than the Kingdom Hall was. In fact, some of them that very day invited me out to lunch and paid for my lunch, and they even prayed for me, right? They were interested in my life. It didn't seem like there were any strings attached either, but when I went to the Kingdom Hall, you know, people greeted me. They were nice to me, but no one invited me out to lunch and paid for my lunch, right? You know what? The Presbyterian church over here, they were, you know, if I'm really evaluating this objectively, they were more kind to me than the Kingdom Hall. What does that actually show you? What does that actually show you? Keep that in mind as we read through this article. Paragraph 2. The love that exists among those in the Christian congregation is indeed remarkable. Now, is this pride or is this pride? Now, it would be one thing if they were quoting a journalist. If they were quoting a journalist who made these observations and they're just quoting it, that would be one thing. But this is the writer or writers of this article saying that about themselves. They're saying, look at us, our love is remarkable. Remarkable to who? To yourselves? Oh, that's okay. That's easy. That's easy to say, right? They continue. Of course, Jehovah's Witnesses are not perfect. So the more we get to know those in the congregation, the more likely we are to see some of their flaws. Some have allowed the imperfections of others to stumble them. Okay, time for some self-reflection. Okay, first of all, brag much, right? Our love is indeed remarkable. Brag much? Okay, well, here's the self-reflective part. What about the flaw? Now, they're the ones who brought up flaws and not being perfect. What about the flaws and imperfections of the governing body? Would anyone in the organization like to share some of those flaws? And when we make mistakes, do we make excuses for those mistakes, or do we apologize for those mistakes? And this is an honest question that you can ask a Jehovah's Witness and say, look, I read in paragraph 2 here that JWs are not perfect and they make mistakes and they have flaws. The governing body are Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Yes, they are Jehovah's Witnesses. Do they also make flaws as a group, as a body? Do they make flaws? Do they have imperfections and even sins? And can you share some examples of those? Okay, so once they share those examples, then you can say, well, thank you for sharing that with me. Can you show me where the governing body ever apologized for those flaws? It is a good thing to apologize for making mistakes, right? Where do they ever apologize for making those mistakes? You're not going to get one. Paragraph 3. Look again at the theme text for this article. Read John 13, 34, and 35. Let's just do that again. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Okay, what is the identifying mark of Christ's true followers? It is love, not perfection. Notice too that Jesus did not say, by this you will know that you are my disciples. He said, by this all will know that you are my disciples. Now this is really, really interesting, because what the Watchtower is doing is they're making self-proclamations about themselves. Remember, they said, isn't it remarkable how much we love each other? But look at what they say here. This is the lack of self-reflection. Jesus did not say, by this you will know that you are my disciples. In other words, this is not about making an internal evaluation and proclaiming it. This is so that all will know that you are my disciples. In other words, people on the outside will notice this. But how many outsider observations can we cite here that all will know? Jesus thus indicated that not only his followers, but also those outside the Christian congregation would recognize his true followers by the unselfish love that they have for one another. Okay, great. But why are they making so many self-proclamations? This article should have no self-proclamations about how remarkable, how great our love is, how much better our love. There should be none of that. It should be citations all from outside. If they really want to prove this, it should be all citations from the outside. And what it should also contain are even critical evaluations where outsiders say, you know what, I noticed this about this religion. These were not loving observations. And then what the Watchtower could do is they could try to defend themselves against those evaluations. Say, you know what, those evaluations were not actually accurate. Here's the accurate way to evaluate this. They could do that, but they did not do that. They almost never, or never ever ever, display the critical evaluations and then evaluate those evaluations and defend themselves. That almost never happens. They always show the good things. So they proclaim the good things about themselves, and they only show the good things that maybe an outsider shows. And we'll see just a couple of small examples from an outsider, but we're going to evaluate those. So here's a note I had about this paragraph. If it really is love and not perfection, then why does the governing body require our absolute obedience? If it really is love and not perfection, then why does the governing body require our absolute obedience? So let's go down to paragraph 5. Actually, here's another note I had on paragraph 3. So these texts, like John 13, 34, and 35, this text is about recognizing individuals, not religious organizations. So in other words, if you go to Jesus' words in John 13, 34, and 35, Jesus is not saying, this is how you determine one true religion from a false religion. If that true religion has love amongst themselves, then they are the true religion. If this other one does not, they are a false religion. That is not what Jesus is saying. What Jesus is talking about is evaluating individuals. And even then, that doesn't conclude that they are a part of the true religion. That doesn't determine they are a part of the true religion. All it can tell you at the most is that they individually are Jesus' true disciples. But it doesn't prove the truth of the organization that they might be a part of. It doesn't prove that. It may be a component of that true religion, if that even is such a thing, and I would even question that. Sure, that may be part of it, but that does not prove the truth. All it can prove is that those individuals who you evaluate are Jesus' disciples. That's all it's saying. Paragraph 5. Jesus made clear that a special kind of love would identify his followers. Read John 5, 12, and 13. I'm sorry, 15, 12, and 13. This is my commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. Then they say, notice that Jesus commanded them, love one another just as I have loved you. Just as I have loved you. This brought one particular text to mind, and that's Romans 5:8. Look at what it says. But God demonstrates his own love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So, while you were yet a sinner, in other words, not a believer, but a sinner, at enmity with God, Christ still died for you. So in other words, Christ died and loved even his enemies. Right? So notice in John 15, 12, and 13, it's love one another just as I have loved you. So the question is, who are the worst enemies of Jehovah's Witnesses? It's not merely the unbelievers, even those who are opposed to Jehovah's Witnesses necessarily. No, that's not it. It's the apostates. Those are the worst of the enemies of Jehovah's Witnesses. But Jesus says, love just as I have loved you. Love one another just as I have loved you. How did Jesus love you? Loving you and dying for you even as an enemy. The Jehovah's Witnesses show that love to those who they have disfellowshipped and decided to shun for the rest of their lives. Even their closest family members. People, by the way, who they decided to shun for reasons that they don't even necessarily know. Because what happens in the congregation when Jehovah's Witnesses are disfellowshipped? All they're told is that so-and-so is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. You may have heard or observed that they were in a judicial committee, and the next thing you know, they're no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And what do? Do you ask questions? Do you find out why this happened? How this happened? Was it valid? Was it fair? You really can't ask any of those questions. You're just supposed to shun them. You're just supposed to shun them. Treat them like they're scum, basically. Like the parable of the Good Samaritan. Just walk right past them. Don't make interaction. Don't help them. Don't check in on them. Just shun them. Basically, make them your enemy. Even if they were disfellowshipped just for disagreeing with a teaching of the governing body and that they're convinced that that teaching is not biblical. They could be disfellowshipped for that, but you are to shun them. What does this show you about the love that Jehovah's Witnesses have for one another? Because you know what love would do? Love would find out what the facts are. Why did they get disfellowship? And what if you find out that disfellowshipping wasn't even fair? What would love do in that case? Would you be willing, if you really love them, would you be willing to go to the elders and oppose their decision? If you determined that what happened wasn't actually fair, that it wasn't even a fair disfellowshipping, would you be willing to do that? If you're not willing to do that, to the expense of your own standing as a Jehovah's Witness, if you wouldn't do that, what does that say about your real love for that person? Paragraph 7. Many people ask, how is it possible to identify the true religion? This is really important here. All religions claim to teach the truth. Is that really true? All religions claim to teach the truth. That's not the case at all. I mean, what do Unitarian Universalists claim? There's all kinds of religions that don't claim to teach the truth. A lot of religions would say there isn't even a truth, right? I don't know where they're getting that from. Anyway, but each one teaches something different about God. And, this is the thing. I hear this all the time. There's like tens and thousands of different Christian denominations that are all teaching something different about God. That's an easy claim to make, but it's actually not an easy, that's not an easy one to prove, right? There may not be as many differences as you might think. If we're going to evaluate the religions, or denominations, that all conclude that the Bible is the sole infallible rule of faith for the church, which is sola scriptura. Take all those churches that affirm that in their statement of faith. They clearly affirm that on the front page of their website. You can easily find it. It's there. Gather up all those churches and tell me, what are the different things that they teach about God? Now, you may find some differences among them, but this article is claiming something different about God. Something, when you say about God, that's talking about something related to who God is. Who God is. How different are things amongst those when you really evaluate them? You might find there's not as many differences as you think. Satan has managed to confuse people by creating a multitude of counterfeit religious organizations. Now, that's not very nice, is it? That's not very nice, is it? The next time you see Jehovah's Witnesses at a cart, you can go up to them, have your phone out, have this paragraph pulled up, and say, I read this in one of your Watchtowers, and they're talking about counterfeit religious organizations. Is that a very kind thing to say about other religions? Now they're probably going to say something like, well, we're just here to teach the truth, and we want to teach the truth about God and show that there's other religions that aren't teaching true things about God. Oh, well, that's really interesting. What if I look at your religion and I say that you're a counterfeit religion that's teaching false things? What do you think about that? Would you be willing to have a discussion about that? You see, Jehovah's Witnesses don't want the same thing said about them that they say about other religion. They're not going to like that, and they may not even want to discuss that, because that's not the kind of people they're looking for today. People who think that their religion is a counterfeit, and someone who can actually reason to defend that. They're not looking for people like that. They can say that about other religions all day long. But when you say that about them, you're just a hateful opposer, right? And they're probably not going to want to spend much time with you. They continue on. But he can never create a worldwide brotherhood of Christians who love one another. Satan can never do that? Really? Now, I'm not going to claim that the true religion is even an organization, right? I'm not going to claim that. But let's just take one example. The Mormons, for example, who are much larger than Jehovah's Witnesses, are they not a worldwide group who shows love to one another? Let's really put them side by side and evaluate that. Do Jehovah's Witnesses really want us to hold their feet to the fire and say that Satan could never do that? Because they obviously are not going to think that the Mormons are a true religion. They're going to say that's a counterfeit religion, which I would actually agree with them on, right? Did Satan do that? Did Satan create a counterfeit religion worldwide that shows love for one another? Show me some examples to where, as a whole, the Mormon Church today is not showing love to one another, and therefore they're a false religion. As a Jehovah's Witness, would you be willing to take that same standard that you're applying to the Mormon Church and apply it to yourself? Say, only Jehovah can do that, really. That is reasonable because genuine love comes from Jehovah, from having his spirit and blessing on a group of worshipers. Is it any wonder then that Jesus said that unselfish love would identify his true followers? Yeah, Jesus did say that, but again, he was not talking about an organization. He's talking about individuals. Paragraph 8. Just as Jesus foretold, many have recognized his true followers by the genuine love that they show among themselves. For example, a brother named Ian recalls the first convention he attended. Now, this is where they're bringing in examples of outside observers. We're just supposed to trust, too, right? That this is exactly what Ian said. Wouldn't it be better to, actually cite a source of, again, maybe a journalist? And I'm sure there's plenty of examples of journalists, people who have published articles talking about their experiences with going to Jehovah's Witnesses conventions and kingdom halls and things like that. I mean, sociologists. I have a sociology degree. I actually did something like this, and I wouldn't say I published it. But I have the paper, and I turned this paper in. And if you want to email me, I will actually share the paper with you. If you're interested in it, I did some sociological research. I could have published it, and maybe I should someday. I had to keep the identity of everyone confidential because I had to make an agreement with the Jehovah's Witnesses on this. But I have done that, and then I know other people have done that, and they've actually published it. So those are ones where the Watchtower could actually quote from a particular source and cite it of an outside observer coming in and observing this love that they are so adamant to prove. But they don't actually do that. We're just given a name, may not be the guy's real name, and they're actually citing this person, and we have no way to evaluate this or to look at anything in context and see what else did Ian observe. We're not told. What does that tell you about this religion? Can we really make an objective analysis by looking at what the Watchtower provides us as sources? Or can we go to sources the Watchtower doesn't even cite? How many sources can we go to make this evaluation from outside observers of the, yep, look at all these people from the outside? No, what the Watchtower wants you to do is to look at their resources, who they cite, who they quote, and make this evaluation. In other words, don't look at anything else. Look at just what we tell you and then make that evaluation. Okay, so we're talking about Ian. He recalls the first convention he attended, which was held at a sports stadium near his home. Ian had been to that stadium a few months earlier for a sporting event. Okay, I gotta laugh at this. He says the contrast with this convention was enormous. The witnesses were polite and well-dressed, and their children were well-behaved. He said, above all, these people seemed to have a feeling of contentment and peace. I'm sorry, but this is like, duh. You're comparing a rowdy sporting event where people might have their chest painted. I mean, acting like crazy people, right? I'm thinking of Buffalo, New York, Buffalo Bills. Those people are crazy. Right? And they know it. They'll admit this. They're crazy. You're going to compare crazy sports people to a religious gathering and be like, wow, I'm impressed of this contrast. This is a really, quite frankly, stupid observation. Like, duh. What would be a better observation would to compare two similar things and say, I went to a Mormon convention, I went to a Jehovah's Witness convention, and I saw this contrast. Now that would be much better. I would actually like to see what contrast you would notice from a Mormon convention and a Jehovah's Witness convention. Would you find that the children are more well-behaved and that they're better dressed at a Jehovah's Witness convention and a Mormon convention? I mean, no, they're probably going to be pretty darn equal. They're going to be pretty darn equal. And I'll be totally honest, this may sound like an insult, but I think it's true. They're both going to be equally dull and boring. I've watched Mormon conventions, I've watched Jehovah's Witness conventions. They're both about equally boring as well. And I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. But quite frankly, paragraph 8 is a pretty stupid comparison. Comparing a sporting event to a religious gathering. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, Ian continues on. I don't remember any of the talks that were given that day, but the conduct of the witnesses made a lasting impression. Okay. I literally laughed out loud when I read that. He goes, okay. Here's what I want people, okay. When people come to my religious gathering, here's what I want people to walk away with. I don't want them to walk away with you know what, they were well behaved and they were well dressed. Like, I don't care about that. You know what I want them to walk away with? I want them to walk away being like, I really learned something from there. I learned about Jesus Christ, and I drew closer to Jesus Christ as a result of that church. I didn't remember anything else, but that's the one thing that stuck with me, was that Jesus Christ was glorified, and I drew closer to Him. If there's anything I want someone to walk away with, it is that. I could nearly care less, in comparison, about what they noticed about the people there, in comparison to them drawing closer to Jesus Christ, and best yet, finding salvation in Jesus Christ, and learning about the gospel, the good news about Jesus Christ. You're not going to find, I would be venturing to guess, any examples of an outside observer coming in in leaving with a testimony like that. Watchtower continues, such conduct, of course, is a result of genuine love that we have for one another. Here's an observation. What makes love genuine rather than superficial? What makes love genuine rather than superficial? I'm not going to answer that, but if you're a Jehovah's Witness and you're buying into all this, and I'm really glad you're watching this, by the way, what makes love genuine rather than superficial? Is it in that love is coerced? How do you determine an enforced love or a coerced love from love that is superficial? How do you determine? Let's use an example of how do you contrast conformity and unity? Conformity and just unity. Because you can have unity without conformity. But can you have conformity without unity? So you can kind of take that and look at love that way. How do you know that a love is genuine rather than superficial or just putting on an act versus genuine love? How do you determine that? And can I determine that? By evaluating Jehovah's Witnesses and the love they have for one another. Paragraph 9, here's another testimony. A brother named John had a similar first impression when he started attending congregation meetings. I was impressed by the friendliness of everyone there. They seemed like saints. Their genuine love convinced me that I had found the true religion. Notice. This is so important. This was John's first impression. He determined as a first impression that they had genuine love. Can you really determine genuine love by a first impression? For spending, at best, 2 hours? Can you really determine that? Can you really determine that? If you ask me, this is incredibly naive that you determine genuine love. This is the whole love at first sight argument, which to me is like totally bogus. Love at first sight? No, that's a myth. And I think most of you would agree with me that literally love at first sight is a myth, right? I'm thinking if any of you have watched The Office. I'm thinking of when Michael Scott first decided that he loved Holly, and he's talking with Jim. And Michael Scott is just convinced that he loves Holly, and he gives a couple of reasons, and Jim's just like, I don't think you've got true love there, right? you need to give it a little bit of time, right? So that's the fallacy of love at first sight. Now, it turned out that Michael really did love Holly, but this took time. It took testing. It took evaluating. It turned out that the love ended up being genuine, but he didn't propose to Holly after an hour, after that first day of deciding he loved Holly. Why not? There's still more to determine. There's more to evaluate. You've got to see if there's skeletons in the closet. You've got to peel back the onion layer and dig deep to find out about whether you really do love this person. And by the way, love is a choice. It's not a feeling. But anyway, with this John's testimony, their genuine love convinced me that I had found the true religion. What if John had gone to a Mormon church or any other church. Unless the Watchtower is going to claim that there's literally no other single congregation that has love for one another within itself, within its walls. I don't think they can make that argument. Because what if John had gone to a Baptist church, a small Baptist church that has 200 people, and he found love there like he had not found anywhere else? Should John then determine that that is the true religion? These are just such naive statements. Such naive statements. Is this the religion that you want to follow? They say time and time again, or just time and again, such experiences underscore that Jehovah's people are proving to be the true Christians. Proving to be the true Christians. This is their proof. Here's my observation. What about all the times that we don't experience this love in the Kingdom Hall? Does that prove they aren't the true religion anymore? This is all so subjective. If I can remember, I'm going to link below to a video I posted it's been a couple of years ago now, but it's called An Interesting Visit to the Kingdom Hall, where I went to a Kingdom Hall and I was not shown the love. I was not shown the love. What should that prove to me from that particular experience? What should that prove? So check that out. Let me know what you think. Paragraph 10. As noted at the outset, none of our fellow believers are perfect. At times, they will say or do things that upset us. Here's my observation and question. What about when child molestation occurs and the authorities are not notified? I mean, to me, to say that's upsetting is an understatement. When child molestation happens and the authorities are not notified, that should upset you. If that does not upset you, I would say you need to really, really look at your conscience. I would say there's something very wrong with you if that doesn't upset you. There's something very wrong if that doesn't upset you. And probably most of you know about all the unreported cases of child molestation and child abuse that have happened in the organization. If you don't know what I'm talking about, leave a comment, message me. You're not going to like what you see. Paragraph 11. Jesus did not expect perfection from his followers. Rather, he lovingly helped them to correct their undesirable personality traits so that they could gain Jehovah's approval. Hold up. Put on the brakes here. How do you gain Jehovah's approval? Let's just ask that question generally. How do I gain Jehovah's approval? How do I gain Jehovah's approval? Now, if you're going to give me a list of do's and don'ts, you've got it all wrong. If you're going to give me a list of do's and don'ts that I need to do to gain Jehovah's approval, you've got it completely wrong, and you do not have the true religion. You see, they're not qualifying the statement here. Because where does it say that Jesus says you need to do X, Y, and Z to gain Jehovah's approval? Now, remember what Jesus said, and I wish I had this quote or this verse offhand. So I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit. When Jesus talked to the man who said that I've kept all of the commandments, right? I've kept all the commandments and I love God, right? I've done all of it. What did Jesus say? Here's one thing that you lack. Sell everything, give it to the poor. And that man went away just upset, depressed, right? Because he didn't do that one thing. So what's Jesus saying, in essence? He's saying that if you want to go the works route, man, you've got to go all the way. And I'm going to keep raising the ante, right? So if that's the standard that you want to hold for yourself, all right, let's go with it. Because the moment you tell me that you've done all of this really well, I'm going to give you 10 things more that you didn't do well, right? The ante can always be raised because you can never get there by your works. You have fallen short, and you have fallen woefully short. Now, one scripture that I did just think about is James 2:10. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles in one point, he has become guilty of all of it. Your works cannot gain Jehovah's approval. Let's go to Romans 3:10. It is written, there is none righteous, not even one. There is none who understands. There is no one who seeks for God. All have turned aside, together they have become worthless. There is none who does good, not even one. And look at what the next chapter in Romans says. Romans 4:5. But to the one who does not work. So Paul is saying, don't work, but believes on him who justifies the ungodly. His faith is counted as righteousness. You know what Paul is saying there? He's saying, don't do good things to gain God's approval. You know what he is saying to do? He's saying, just believe. Have faith. Then you become approved by Jehovah, because your faith is counted as righteousness. So don't work, have faith. That's how you get Jehovah's approval. Remember, Jesus died not for the godly, but for the ungodly, the unrighteous. Watchtower has it all wrong here. Look at this at the end of paragraph 11. John had their mother ask Jesus to give them prominent positions in the kingdom. And they cite here Matthew 20:20. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to him with her sons, bowing down and making a request to him. And he said of her, what do you wish? She said to him, command that in your kingdom these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right and the one on the left. But Jesus answered and said, you do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink? James and John were thus displaying the traits of pride and ambition. What about the governing body? What about the governing body? Because here's the thing. Jesus did not give this governing body, these men in this governing body that we have today, Jesus did not elect their positions. Jesus did not give them specifically their positions. You know how they got their positions? It was self-appointed. It was self-appointed. They put themselves in the prominent position. Jesus did not give these individual men that position. Paragraph 13. How did Jesus deal with the situation? He did not become indignant. He did not say that he was going to look for better apostles, men who had greater humility, and who would always treat one another with love. Rather, Jesus patiently reasoned with these sincere men. And this is verses 25 through 28. Jesus said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them." They lord it over them. "And their great men exercise authority over them. It is not this way among you." In other words, you're not lording things over others. It's not this way among you. In other words, in the Gentiles, with their hierarchies, they require the absolute obedience, right? This is not this way among you. "Whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." In other words, you don't become great by appointing yourself to that great position. So how does all this work? If you become a servant and a slave, how do you get to become first? It's not through self-appointment. Because what happens in this case? If you become humble and you become a slave and a servant, it is Jesus who will be the one to exalt you to a prominent position. It's not you exalting yourself and then requiring absolute, unquestioning obedience to your subordinates. It's not how it works. That is exactly how the governing body does it. We're going to wrap it up here pretty soon. No doubt Jesus took into consideration the apostles' background. They had grown up in an environment where the religious leaders placed great emphasis on prominence and positions. Can you talk about a lack of self-reflection here? Matthew 23:6. "And they loved the place of honor at banquets and at the best seats in the synagogues." Who does that sound like? Who are the ones that are now placing themselves in front of the TV cameras and broadcasting themselves all over the world and saying things like, we are the voice of Jesus, and you need to listen to us like you would the voice of Jesus? Who are the ones placing emphasis on their great prominence and position? Who is doing that amongst the Jehovah's Witnesses? None other than the governing body. The Jewish religious leaders were also self-righteous. Who does that sound like? The citation here is Luke 18:9-12. "And he also told this parable to some people who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and viewed others with contempt. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and was praying these things to himself. 'God, I thank you that I am not like other people.'" Who does that sound like here? Now we can set the governing body aside and just look at this article. "We're greater than everyone else. Isn't our love remarkable?" So, God, I thank you, I'm not like those other people. Those people whose love is not so remarkable. We are so remarkable. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes of all I get. Look at how great I am. But the tax collector, standing some distance away, was even unwilling to lift up his eyes to heaven, and was beating his chest, saying, "God, be merciful to me, the sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted." Now, take this article that we are reading. Who are the ones exalting themselves, saying, hey, this is how great we are. Look at how remarkable we are. Even though we do have some imperfections, we're the greatest. We have the greatest love amongst ourselves, better than any others. It's so great that you can actually prove us to be the true religion. You know what? if you ever go to any religious organization, any congregation, any church, and you hear them talking about how great they are, turn around and run for the hills. What you should find, first and foremost, in that church, in that religion, in that congregation, is, wow, look at how much they are glorifying God and His Son, Jesus Christ. And they are directing everyone, not to themselves, but to Jesus. Exalting Jesus, glorifying Jesus, focusing on Jesus. If that's not the most first and foremost thing that you see happening, say, turn around, go away. That's not where you want to be. All right, we're ending it here. Paragraph 19, as a group, Jehovah's Witnesses are proving to be Jesus' true disciples. We individually prove that we are real followers of Jesus when we show unselfish love toward our brothers and sisters despite their imperfections. In the process, we may help others to recognize the true religion and to join us in worshiping Jehovah, the God of love. Let us be determined to continue demonstrating the love that identifies true Christians. Wow, okay, we're wrapping it up there. I said everything I think I could say about this article. What are your thoughts? Did you notice the same things? What do you think about what I said? Did you notice anything different? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear from you. If you can't do that publicly, I totally understand. I'd love to hear from you privately. There's a number of ways for you to contact me. Just go down to the show notes or the video description. We can talk by a number of different means. And if you need any help, any assistance, anything that I can do, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you want to support this work, please consider liking this, hitting the thumbs up, hitting that notification bell, and subscribing. All of those things help this podcast immensely from getting recognized in the algorithms. We also are on most of the podcast platforms, so Apple Podcasts, if you can leave me a review there, hit the 5 stars, anything like that, that also really helps getting this work recognized. If you want to support this work financially, there is a Patreon link below. There's a lot of expenses that get incurred here on a monthly and annual basis. So if you feel led to help me out there, I would greatly appreciate your financial support there. But regardless of how you support this work, thank you. Those who share this with others, thank you. I appreciate that. So I don't know what next week will bring, but regardless, I'll see you next week, hopefully. But one thing I will say, I just thought of, I am watching through the 2023 convention videos, so I hope to piece together a bunch of clips from that and do hopefully a full review of the 2023 convention. There's a lot of time that goes into piecing all that together. There's just hours and hours and hours to watch. So one way that you could help me that I just thought of, if you do want to send me, you could email me, email me like time-stamped indications and some notes about some things that you noticed. That could really help me on the review because there's a lot of things that I may not catch. So if you do feel led to help in that particular way, let me know. And if you need a link to the convention talks, let me know. I can send those to you. So with that said, hope you have a great week. We will see you next week. For more information about Jehovah's Witnesses and other topics, please visit michaeljfelker.com. There you can also reach me directly to submit questions or comments to be covered on the JW Review. To subscribe to this podcast, please go to iTunes and search for the JW Review.